think most of these universities would be embarrassed if they were publicly called out that they were unwilling to give a 4-year scholarship to an athlete. So why did it take a request from Congress for this roll call for this to ever reach the light of day? And I would ask for this list to be made part of the public record.
So ordered.
Well, the data were made available to all of the membership. So
I'm talking about to the public. Why don't you put it on your website?
I don't know that I'm not debating the fact. I just don't simply know whether it was not put on the website. It was the debate was very public. It was obviously a very disputed case. It's a very interesting debate. I was quite stunned by some of the argumentation. So we have and one of the things I didn't mention about changes that I anticipate in the coming weeks. Mr. Branch pointed out something that's part of the Olympic movement, Olympic tradition now, that in the United States that student athletes have to have Olympic athletes have to have a substantial vote in voice in all of the deliberations of the Olympic bodies. I certainly advocate for a model much like that, and indeed the proposal that's going to be voted on later in August will include full representation of students as voting members alongside the presidents and athletic directors on all of the legislative bodies. But we currently have student-athlete advisory committees that we turn to on all of these issues.
Dr. Emmert, that's all great.
No, but if I might, ma'am, the student-athlete advisory committee advised against putting in multi-year scholarships because they happened to agree with coaches that it was a good incentive for their colleagues to remain engaged. So some universities voted to overturn this because their very own student-athlete advisory committee said, no, don't give multi-year scholarships. We like one-year scholarships. So it was, my point is simply, ma'am, it was quite counterintuitive in many levels, and
okay.
I was quite
Fair
appalled
enough.
by it.
I would like to talk to those students because I think they probably felt pressure from coaches if they were all student athletes. I have a hard time imagining that any student thinks it's in their best interest to get a one-year scholarship rather than a 4-year scholarship. I'd like to get to handling rape accusations.
Yes, ma'am.
In one of the responses to one of the letters I sent you, you indicated that you provide an online Title IX legal and best practices material and video classes. My question is, in that material, do you make the recommendation to your institutions that they not be allowed to handle the adjudication of Title IX complaints involving sexual assault against student athletes?
I don't know the answer to that.
Well, we've done a survey and the results came out today, and I was shocked to find out that 30% of the Division I, II, and III schools allow their athletic departments to handle the allegations against their athletes. Now, we have a big problem with victims being willing to come forward. And I assume you've read the long cover story about the investigation that did not occur with Mr. Winston at Florida State?
I have.
That there was no investigation of that allegation. We will never know whether he was guilty or not because nobody ever investigated it because of who he was. If you're a victim and you know your allegation is going to be handled by the athletic department as opposed to any other student on campus who's handled in a different system, why in the world would you think the process was going to be fair?
I read your data this morning, and I was both, it sounds like, equally surprised and dismayed by that fact. I think the concern you're raising is spot on. I think it creates, first of all, an enormous amount of conflicts of interest. I think it creates the kind of enormous apprehension you're describing right now on the part of a victim. As somebody who spent most of his life on campus and in several jobs had responsibilities for campus safety whenever I was a president, I had to deal with victims and family members of victims and people who had suffered egregious harm. And I always found it the most difficult problem that I'd ever wrestled with. I think this is something that needs to be addressed. I think your data is shining a very important light on a phenomenon that I think most of the members are going to be very surprised to know exists.
Well, I think that my sense, and I have a lot of questions about transparency of money and about whether or not things are made public. I feel for you because in part of me thinks you're captured by those that you're supposed to regulate but then you're supposed to regulate those that you're captured by. And I can't tell whether you're in charge or whether you're a minion to them. The notion that you can't forcefully state, I will go after this and I will make sure that no university allows their athletic department to handle a sexual allegation against one of their team members. You know, I don't sense that you feel like you have any control of this situation, and if you have no control, if you're merely a monetary pass-through, why should you even exist?
Well, I think the reality is that while the issue we're talking about here I don't have a vote on and I don't get to set those policies, I can certainly set the tone on it, and I can certainly be someone who voices a very loud opinion and says this is not right. This is inappropriate. These are the conflicts that exist when you have a policy and a practice like this on your campus. When I first took this job, the very first summit I held in Indianapolis was a summit on sexual violence. It was a summit that led to the creation of a working group of experts, not college athletic folks, but of experts from across the country to create a working group and a think tank. We're going to be issuing the results of their work this summer as a workbook and a guide to best practices. I'm now, thanks to your work, going to go in and make sure that this issue is addressed in that handbook. And I'm going to talk to the leadership at our very next meeting in August about the fact that this is really inappropriate, and we need to find ways to make sure that athletic departments are not the ones who are responsible for adjudication of these issues because of all the obvious concerns that you raise.